Hello, good evening. How many of you have written the mains? Okay, not many. So, those of you who have been who are watching, maybe online, if you have written the mains, whatever you have written is the right answer. All right, always have that feeling. Always write with conviction. No matter whether you know or don't know, don't write the obvious lie. But if you can make general stories, if that is the condition, write it with conviction. All right, or एक बार exam हो जाए तो don't analyze too much. But since we are in an annual cycle where examination takes place every year, so what lessons can we learn from this year's paper, and thereby how to approach questions from international relations is something that we are going to talk about. Now, if you look at the international relations segment of GS2, more or less what we call the pattern, and second, the structure of the question paper remains the same. Meaning, there are 4 questions asked. This subject is worth 50 marks. That has not changed. Secondly, questions appear at question number 9 and 10 and 19 and 20. That has not changed. Similarly, the number of words that you are expected to write, that has also not changed. So you are writing in total 800 words to answer these questions. All right. So that's basically, that is what we can say about the pattern. More or less, pattern analysis is not very useful because the syllabus itself is defined in very cryptic terms. So each point of the syllabus would open up into different kinds of questions, different countries. But broadly, we can make a sense that there is some expectation that UPSC has. All right, so first of all, when you are writing the examination, preparing the examination, you are in any stage, have the syllabus in your mind, its points. Second, when you are thinking about the answer, the words in the syllabus are helpful. And fourth, sometimes when you don't have a ready-made structure to the answer, syllabus is helpful. So syllabus is something that you should have in mind. Now looking at the paper itself. So if you look at the topics, the second part of the syllabus says bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements. And the last part of the syllabus says important international institutions, agencies and fora. So one thing, regularly from these 2 themes, questions have appeared. All right, and every year broadly from these themes there would be questions. So that's why pattern analysis is a bit limited here, because broadly the syllabus is such that you can justify the topics under any single category or a combination of these categories, combination of syllabus topics. So 2 syllabus topics have inspired this question that we will see. But we also see that this is a question, and this is one of the few occasions where UPSC, as it is, repeats the theme. So SCO as a question appeared, as a theme appeared in 2021 also. So there is a repetition of theme. And next thing that we should remember is, and this is something that does not change, that studying for international relations has to be from the perspective of India. What India is thinking, how India is being affected, what are India's interests, what is India's view. Is India doing something because of which any particular organization may have come into news? All right. So it is very clear that SCO India was chairing this year. So UPSC asked a question on the SCO. So India specific current affairs, and as close as July is the month where SCO summit took place. But in any case, the question was repeated. Now the structure of this question, each question is preceded by a statement which is within quotation marks, meaning that is giving you an opportunity to think very broadly, but then it is followed by a specific question, demand of the question. So you have to narrow it down in terms of themes. What are the themes? What are the aspects that you would like to highlight? So you see this question, virus of conflict is affecting the functioning of the SCO. Assume it is somebody's opinion. Now, if you are prepared well, if you have read the newspapers, you know whether this opinion is correct or not, which is by and large correct. All right, there are internal conflicts between the members of SCO, and some of the members of SCO may be involved in external conflicts also. All right, and this theme has been covered, captured in writings in newspapers, forums like ORF, which are the regular sources that we generally say you should be reading. Now moving on, there is the 4th topic in the syllabus, which says diaspora, Indian diaspora. Full stop. All right. Now, this again is a repetitive theme. Every few years, UPSC, not regularly, not every year, but every few years, every other year, UPSC has been asking these questions from diaspora. By and large, the focus of diaspora is a particular geographical region where Indian diaspora is present. Second, what role they are playing, what their status is, and certainly how are they related with India. That is by and large what the UPSC's theme or ambition has been when they have asked questions about the diaspora. Again, an awareness-based question. Now, again, it is rooted in a repetition. 2020, there was a question, Indian diaspora or Indians acquiring leading position in the economy and politics of Europe and America. That is the question that UPSC had asked. Now, you see India-specific current affairs. Why? Many things. What happens in international relations? So countries have interests. If their interests converge, they would cooperate. And this convergence of interest can be in the area of economy, trade, technology, defense, security. But one of the prominent areas of engagement between many countries and India is people-to-people ties. All right? So diaspora then, by and large, is that part of the relation also. But apart from that, diaspora itself is a transnational entity, meaning it is not located in any single geography, single country. There are many countries where the diaspora is located. So you will see, for example, India has been signing migration and mobility agreement, meaning India is a large demography. There is a large moving population. People are going outside for education. People are going outside for work. And India as a country, in its interest, would like ease of movement of its people. So migration and mobility agreements with Australia, migration and mobility agreements with France. So this was, in a sense, something that we may notice, but something that we should all notice is when Prime Minister went to US, there was a dinner evening where the leading figures of Indian diaspora were present. All right? So this aspect has also been covered in the newspapers. Right? So fairly predictable in that sense, and content also does not pose any difficulty. Right? So first two questions would fall in the easy category. Now, if we look at the question itself, Indian diaspora has scaled new heights in the West. Describe its economic and political benefits for India. The good thing is, if you look at last year's current affairs, the Parliamentary Standing Committee on External Affairs had released a report on Indian diaspora. So meaning again, whatever source of current affairs you are reading, whether you are aware of migration mobility agreements or not, but UPSC is telling you that if you have been regular with your preparation, you would have the facts, the numbers, the context, and you would be able to answer this question. So easy in terms of availability and predictability. Now, the second topic of the syllabus is bilateral, regional, global groupings, agreements involving India and or affecting India's interests. Now, these words become important. All right? First of all, bilateral, two countries. All right? Regional, by definition, more than two countries. So it now goes into the realm of multilateral cooperation. Three or more countries cooperating together, that would be called multilateralism. Now you will see global. So global would be, for example, let's say today there are multiple processes which are going on. For example, countries are concerned about securing the supplies for critical minerals. All right, and the US has launched an initiative which is called the Mineral Security Partnership. So again, this would be what we will call a global arrangement, global agreement, global grouping, right? Because it is a dialogue. So again, fairly regularly questions are asked. This is also rooted in current affairs. And this is again, I would say, from India's perspective, if you are looking at international relations, you would have come across India's position. All right? The expansion and strengthening of NATO and a stronger US-Europe strategic partnership works well for India. What is your opinion about this statement? Give reasons and examples to support your answer. The most difficult part of this answer was getting carried away with this, that UPSC is asking for your opinion. All right? Your opinion does not matter. It has not mattered before in this examination. It will not matter in the future also. So when UPSC is saying what is your opinion, it means have you paid attention to the opinions of those who matter? All right? For example, have you been paying attention to, let's say, what Dr. Jaishankar has been saying? All right? And that's why he has become subject to so many memes, especially the ones which basically are about thug life. All right? That Mr. Jaishankar is asked a question and he is responding with pomp to the West. So India has a position on these issues. This is something that people often forget. So they would sing paeans about NATO, but they will forget what India thinks on this. All right? So this question was deceptively simple. Simple in terms of content, availability of content, and if you paid attention, what India was saying on this matter was also very clear. You must have come across this in the context of NATO plus kind of formulations being talked about, where the US and some officials of NATO are saying that they are willing to cooperate with India in the NATO framework if India wants to. So if India wants to, meaning India's view would be more important here. You must have come across this in the context of current affairs of Sweden joining the NATO. All right. You must have come across this in the context of the expansion of NATO threatening Russia. All right. So there are various perspectives from which you must have been aware of NATO. And it was only a matter of time before UPSC asked this kind of a question. Now remember, this kind of a question does not neatly fit into any particular category of the syllabus. India is not part of NATO, but India has relations with US. India has relations with Russia. The Ukraine crisis is a larger geopolitical crisis where India is not directly involved, but India's interests have been affected. And thereby India's response is something that should definitely be highlighted in this particular answer, apart from what NATO can do or can't do, right? So this is where give reasons and examples to support your आंसर. अब एग्जाम्पल यूपीएससी ने पूछ लिया तो आप कोई लाइव एग्जाम्पल दे नहीं सकते, बट यू कैन ऑलवेज राइट फॉर एग्जाम्पल अकॉर्डिंग टू डॉक्टर जयशंकर. All right? So that is basically what you can always do. So UPSC is saying that now you can use quotes also. Specifically, when these kinds of questions come, doing justice to them is only possible when you are aware of the official line of thinking. What the spokesperson of MEA is saying or not saying, what Dr. Jaishankar is saying or not saying. There cannot be a freestanding answer. Now the last part of the syllabus is important international institutions, agencies, fora, their structure and mandate. Structure, how do they look like? All right? Who are the members? What are the decision-making structures? Mandate, what is an organization supposed to do? Meaning functions. And regularly you will see this part of the syllabus produces questions every year and by and large in the same format, right? So this year, for example, it came in the context of sea is an important component of the cosmos. All right, again a statement. So maritime domain has been becoming important. It's very clear. Indo-Pacific itself is rooted in, while Eurasia is a continental concept based on land, Indo-Pacific is a maritime concept based in oceans. So oceans, their significance has been increasing. All right, in this question there is no India mentioned. So again, the answer would be about what IMO is, when it was formed, what it does, its conventions. So difficulty of the question lies in the demand of specificity of the content. Here you cannot make a story. All right, you cannot make a grand narrative. You have to remember IMO conventions. So here is the good thing. If you have been reading newspaper, you will find, for example, in 2022, India and Sri Lanka opened a maritime rescue center. When that was covered in the newspaper, the very first line would say, under the IMO, or IMO facilitates this kind of cooperation. So meaning again, it is rooted in what India is doing. Second thing is that this year, one of the codes concerning the safety of industrial persons, which arises from a main convention followed by the IMO, which is called SOLAS, Safety of Life at Sea. So this industrial persons code comes into force. And it was in this context, it had come into India's consideration also. All right, it had come into India's consideration. And you would see India increasingly is articulating its position on the ocean. So we have a policy called SAGAR, security and growth for all. And in this, security does not have a narrow meaning. All right, security and safety have a broader meaning, very much rooted in what are the requirements of the ocean. All right. So IMO ka question hai, again, your contribution would be if you can bring India. All right, if you can bring India. And again, IMO was in news on multiple occasions in the current affairs. Difficulty of the question is not whether you could have known about the IMO because it was coming in the newspapers. All right, the difficulty is the specificity of the content which is required, right? Meaning you have to remember the agreements, all right? At least 1, 2, 3, or some initiatives. Or the best way of remembering these kinds of things is if you've come across any news concerning India, let's say IMO is mentioned, so every time make it a point that you go back and do some search on IMO, very brief, what it does, who its members are, where it is located, right? And if you are making notes, make such side notes, because these are facts, right? Which you would only be able to remember by repeating them continuously. So this was a difficult question, all right? If you found it difficult, then there is a reasonable reason why, or reasonable fact why it was difficult, right? So now we have familiarity with syllabus and how syllabus produces different kinds of questions, right? By and large, two things. I will not tell you the takeaway at the end. I am telling you the takeaway at the beginning itself. Two things remain important. Please continuously read newspaper or be regular with current affairs. All your problems related to IR would be solved. All right, rather than running after this material, that material, please read a good newspaper and please follow a good standard current affairs source. Two, always have an India-specific mindset. All right, because in international relations, people also do tend to get carried away. They start making foreign policy. Your job is not to make foreign policy. We have a very good foreign minister for that. All right, and that too, he had also written the same examination that you did. So learn from him. When he was writing the examination, he was not making foreign policy. He was studying about the foreign policy. So when you are writing the examination, that is what you have to do. Don't make foreign policy. Study, observe, learn, read about foreign policy. And being India specific would always give you an opportunity to value add to your answers, even when India is not mentioned directly. Second, it will help you in avoiding mistakes. For example, going too positive about NATO, all right, when you are aware of India's position. So focus in IR also remains India, all right? And the third thing is syllabus. You would have to develop your own understanding of the syllabus, meaning what kind of topics generally are producing what kinds of questions. But also understand, no part of the syllabus, none of the GS papers are watertight compartments. So the last thing that remains important is if you want to value add, stand out, you start making correlations. All right, when you are reading anything, ask this question. In which part of the syllabus, in which paper am I going to find use for this information? All right, what kind of question would this content that I'm reading be helpful in? All right. And then you already have the lens, paper 1, paper 2, paper 3, paper 4. For example, this is a question in the context of maritime domain. It starts with a statement, which can also very well be a statement before a question in paper 1 in geography. All right. It can also be a question in paper 3 in the context of blue economy or port-led development. So start correlating. And in IR, in simple terms, correlate domestic with external. All right. What is India's priority? And in that context, where does this agreement, this relation fit in? All right. So these are 3 or 4 takeaways that I would like to share with you. Now, just for the sake of it, 2022 again, was there anything different? Yes, there was one thing which was different, 2 prominent questions from the neighborhood. All right, 2 prominent questions from the neighborhood. So pattern-wise, around 45% of questions still are asked from India's neighborhood, meaning close to home is what is most important. India's national interests are the most important things, even when you are studying international relations. All right, so it is India's relations. So 2 questions, but again, you see, this is a question on organizations, regional, bilateral, global groupings, BIMSTEC, neighborhood, but organization also. All right, this particular question, neighborhood, a particular country relation, but the economic and strategic context. All right, economic and strategic context. Then I2, U2. Now, this is a question which is combining a lot of actors. All right. So by and large, where would it fall? Bilateral, regional, global groupings. All right. So again, syllabus के आधार पे किसी भी चीज को justify किया जा सकता है. और lastly, clean energy is the order of the day. मैंने जब कहा correlation, it is about India's priority. Describe briefly India's changing policy towards climate change in various international fora in the context of geopolitics. All right. So various international forums mainly would be the UNFCCC process, UNFCCC process, COPs. Second, India's environmental and energy cooperation in bilateral relations, like with US, like with European Union, like let's say with Russia, like let's say with West Asian countries. So the more you know about India, the more you will be able to answer this question. Another thing about this question, now this is an issue-based question. When there is an issue-based question, all parts of the syllabus virtually can be helpful in writing the answer, issue. All right, so it was about energy security. This year, you could broadly again see in the IMO question, the issue is the importance of maritime domain. All right, so ideas of sustainability, ideas of climate change, ideas of environment, they would always come in. So even in IR, if you can find an opportunity to write points on climate change, SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, that would be a value addition. So that is the kind of correlation that is required. 2021, what can we learn from here? So we could see Africa is a consistent presence in the paper. So again, like you have diaspora, every other year you would have some question from diaspora. Every few years there would be questions from Africa. So Africa is also a repeating theme when it comes to the examination, if we have to think about anything about the pattern. All right? And again, you would see examine India's influence, interest, actions, India's, right? That would be the focus. Now, USA is facing an existential threat in the form of China that is much more challenging than the erstwhile Soviet Union. Now, this question gives you an opportunity to think in these terms. When it comes to certain kinds of countries like US, like China, they are systemically important countries. So they are important from bilateral perspective, but their actions are important at the global scale also, directly or indirectly would affect India's interests. So thereby countries like US, countries like China are at the backdrop of many questions. For example, this year's NATO question has to have a mention of US and China, all right? So here also you could see, this is a question on US and China. UPSC is asking you to think about it, very much based in current affairs, everybody is an expert. But again, in this kind of a question where India is not mentioned directly, you have to bring India, all right? India's position on these kinds of issues. For example, India does not stand for a world dominated by two powers or one power. India stands for a world which is multipolar in nature. India wants a world where there are rules, rules-based order, and these rules should also apply to great powers like US and China, all right? So UPSC is also giving you an opportunity by not mentioning India directly in the question to bring in India as your value addition. So very clearly show what your focus has been, right? Now similarly, you will see critically examine the aims and objectives of SCO, repetition of theme. By and large, if you have written the answer to this question, you would be able to write the answer to the question which is asked this year also. And the newly tri-nation partnership AUKUS, what is AUKUS? AUKUS is a military alliance, all right? And what is India's policy? India, if you look at G20's concluding statement, on Ukraine there has been a consensus because we have allowed national positions to be recognized, but we have also used principles. So, for example, the G20 the joint statement says, inadmissibility of force or use of force in international relations. Now remember why India was non-aligned in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. It was because India did not want to join a military alliance. Now ask this question, has that changed today? Now, 75 years of independence, 75 years of foreign policy, that has not changed. All right, India still says that military alliances are not the solution. All right, because if there would be one military alliance, obviously it would attract another counter military alliance. And then that vitiates the international atmosphere, which is not good for us because we want to focus on a stable course of development or economic growth. Right, so answers should be always from India's perspective. AUKUS military alliance, US, etc. China would also come here. Right, so some countries are at the backdrop of most of the questions which are asked. All right, and again, these kinds of questions also, your guide always is, what is India's position? So if you have not noticed or if you are not in the habit of noticing India's position, please do so. In newspapers, lines like, according to the MEA spokesperson, if you are worried about Canada, leave it to the MEA and listen to what the spokesperson of MEA is saying, because that would be useful if somebody asks you the same question. All right, so understand what your purpose is. You're not making foreign policy, it is already made, you cannot influence it, you can learn it. All right, and if somebody asks you any question, always start with India's position, what India's position is. Because in foreign policy, you cannot have an individual position. All right, because foreign policies are that of states, all right, not individuals. Moving forward, 2020 क्या हुआ? पहला question, role of WHO. Now replace it, role of IMO. This year IMO's question has been asked. Again, a very structure mandate based question. But also in that particular year, because WHO was criticized, so a critical intent, but again that question would be answered through structure and mandate, right? So for example, any organization like WHO does not have enforcement powers, all right? Any organization is only as good or as bad as its members make it to be. And thereby organizations are limited because of two major factors. One is economic, that they are dependent on funding on their member countries. So those who fund have influence. If they don't agree, organizations would start decaying. All right. And second is what is called politics, great power politics. What is liked by America is not liked by China. All right. So on and so forth. So again, it comes from structure and mandate. Again, the Indian diaspora question, decisive role to play, politics and economy of America and Europe, a region or two regions and two themes, politics and economy. This question required answer examples, a lot of examples. Now the same examples would be helpful in this year's question, with the only difference that the major part would be showing what benefits are there for India. All right. Here it was substantiate with examples. Yes, this is the case. This is something that has happened. Quadrilateral security dialogue is transforming itself into a trade bloc from a military alliance. Quad is not a military alliance. Quad is a dialogue. How do you know what Quad is? Just listen to what Dr. Jaishankar says when he refers to Quad. All right. It's a dialogue. It was never a military alliance. India would never join a military alliance. It has economic prospects because all countries are major trading countries or major economies, right? So in that context, again, India, US, other countries, but also China would come into this picture, right? Because for all of them, China is the largest trading partner. And for all of them, China is a larger strategic threat also. So there is a paradox, all right? So this question again would have been answered if you knew what India's position is. India would be keen on economic cooperation, less so on converting Quad into an economic bloc. All right? Current affairs based questions. So ये सारे question हो गए. अब हम इस साल के questions देखते हैं. How do we answer these questions? So virus of conflict is affecting the functioning of the SCO is the statement. All right? If this is the statement, then of course my job is to start with the statement. All right, I would start with the statement, right? I will identify two things. One, either it can be SCO or it can be conflict. If you're focused on the word virus, then I can't do anything. All right, so it is very clear that I will start my introduction with these, right? In the introduction, what do we do when there are statements? We substantiate the statement. All right, how do we do it? If we have any data, right? What does data do? It creates visibility and maybe a false sense of trust in the examiner that this student knows. All right, you tell a simple story and then you tell the story with firstly, secondly, thirdly, or you add some numbers, right? According to this survey, this % of people drink coffee and tea. Nobody is going to ask कि ये survey किसने किया, कब किया. लेकिन आपका स्टेटमेंट अपने आप क्या दिखने लगता है? इम्प्रेसिव दिखने लगता है. ऑल राइट, सो ये हम कर सकते हैं. दूसरा हम कर सकते हैं इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट से शुरुआत, राइट? यहाँ पे क्या हमारे काम में आता है? करंट अफेयर्स. ऑल राइट, वी कैन स्टार्ट विद करंट अफेयर्स ऑल्सो. सो स्टार्टिंग शुड नॉट बी अ प्रॉब्लम. ऑल राइट, सो ऑफ कोर्स द starting that I would suggest is the recent summit of the SCO chaired by India came in the backdrop of poly crisis situation. अब ये वर्ड भी कहाँ से आया? पॉली क्राइसिस, अखबार पढ़ने से. All right, multiple crisis, that the world is facing multiple crisis. So you could see that we can use some jargons. We have clearly started with recent. We have very clearly brought in India at the beginning of it. And we are telling the examiner that we know why you are asking this question, why you expect that I should know the answer to this question, all right? In the backdrop of polycrisis, right? Multiple crisis, right? Polycrisis situation faced by the international community, all right? So, the Eurasia region, so now we are telling the examiner that we know that when we talk about SCO, it is important in the context of a region called Eurasia, all right? So if some people are fond of making maps, some people are fond of suggesting making maps. If you wanted to make map, this was the question where you could have made the map. Either make a map of Eurasia, larger map of Eurasia, and just circle the member countries. Or if you are adventurous enough, try to draw the map of all the countries visible. All right, the SCO countries, right? 8 countries. So again, remember, when you are deciding to draw a map, it is always determined on the basis of whether you have practiced enough or not, whether you are comfortable or not. The examiner is not telling you essentially to draw a map. The examiner is telling you to do things with clarity. All right, I don't have time. That is what the examiner would say. My life is very busy. I'm not being paid a lot for checking your answer script. So make my life easy. All right, that is what the examiner would say, right? So ये हमने कर दिया. The Eurasia region, where the SCO has its roots since 2001, meaning in order to say that we know the background, we are not saying that SCO was formed in 2001. We are saying that it is located in Eurasia since 2001. All right. So the Eurasia region, where the SCO is located since 2001, has been marked by regional conflicts as well as great power politics, all right, great power politics. Or you can again bring a jargon. So when you are writing IR answer or any subject's answer, every subject has certain broad jargons which can be safely used. All right. So for example, in this context, you may remember something like a great game, all right, or a new great game, which is basically great power politics. Great game is about Russia, Britain. New great game is about China, Russia, US. All right. So that is something that we have done to contextualize. And we have brought in the second focus, which is conflict. Now, what would be the next part? The next part would be giving some examples as briefly as possible. All right, give examples. All right, what kind of examples? So you can then broadly have a framework where you can talk about broad categories like internal and external. All right, that the SCO is surrounded by multiple internal and external conflicts. Once you have reached here, it becomes easier. You can give various examples. For example, bilateral conflicts or history of bilateral conflicts between countries like India and Pakistan, India and China. If you want to go a bit more, you can talk about how the Central Asian states are new states. So they have unresolved issues of border and resource sharing. So it from time to time erupts in conflict between countries like Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan had a conflict over some pasture land, right? It was also in news over the last 3 years. Or you will say that internally many of the Central Asian states are conflict prone given the difficulty of state building. So for example, Kazakhstan, violence erupted in 2022, all right? The military had to be called in, Russia had to intervene. तो ये हो गया आपके internal conflicts. अब आप कह सकते हैं कि भाई it is also influenced by the involvement of some of its members in larger regional conflicts and strategic competitions. So for example, Russia is involved in the Ukraine conflict, all right? Or for example, China is pursuing a path of strategic competition with USA with the likelihood of a conflict. All right, with the likelihood of a conflict, right? Or you can, in the case of China, say South China Sea, all right? That China's territorial claim in South China Sea are surrounded by कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स, ऑलराइट. सो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट का लिटरल मतलब वॉर भी हो सकता है, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट का मतलब कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ ओपिनियन भी हो सकता है, राइट. जितना क्लोज टू वॉर आप रखेंगे वो आपका एग्जाम्पल ठीक होगा, लेकिन अगर आपको और एग्जाम्पल चाहिए तो आप कॉन्फ्लिक्ट को थोड़ा सा ट्विस्ट कर सकते हैं बाय कॉन्टेक्चुअलाइजिंग इट एट स्ट्रैटेजिक कॉम्पिटिशन. दे दिया आपने, हो गया. जितना ब्रीफली इसको करना है उतना ब्रीफली. सो ये दो पार्ट क्लियर हो गए. इसके बाद एग्जाम्पल आएगा, ये क्लियर हो गया. अब इसके बाद बेसिकली हमें ये करना है कि इंडिया को लेके आना है. तो इसीलिए हमने शुरुआत में इंडिया को ले आया था, ये कहते हुए कि भाई ये जो है इंडिया ने चेयर किया, राइट, ताकि एग्जामिनर मिस नहीं करे इंडिया को कि भाई इंडिया कहाँ आ रहा है, क्योंकि आपको कॉन्टेक्स्ट बनाना पड़ेगा, कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स क्या है वो बताना पड़ेगा, राइट. पॉली क्राइसिस जैसे वर्ड यूज कर लें तो अपने आप आपको मौका मिल जाता है. तो आप ये भी इंडिकेट कर सकते हैं कि भाई क्या इसके डिफरेंट एस्पेक्ट्स हैं जिनसे इंडिया प्रभावित है, राइट. तो आप एससीओ के अंदर और एससीओ के बाहर दोनों की बातें कर सकते हैं, ठीक है. तो जब आप एससीओ के बाहर की बात कर रहे हैं या एससीओ के अंदर की बात कर रहे हैं तो इंडिया के पर्सपेक्टिव से आपको ये बताना है दैट इंडिया स्टैंड्स फॉर multilateral cooperation and constructive approach to conflict resolution. All right. So once we have made this, what we'll do, we'll make a transition. We will say this can be seen through the following, all right, in the case of SCO, right. So what will you do? Now you start saying what is important. So for example, do you remember any jargons? For example, do you remember what is the theme of this year's SCO? India's presidency of SCO was defined by the theme of secure. All right. So this itself is an example of how India wants to promote multifarious cooperation, and it is aware of the conflict, right? So, for example, India would say under secure that it is necessary that countries respect certain principles like sovereignty, right? S is for sovereignty, territorial integrity. This is what we do when we message to China without taking the name of China at SCO, right? That what we expect China to do is this, right? Second, we will see that India has focused on, for example, if you see very prominently, promoting cultural cooperation, all right? So cultural cooperation, use of soft power is for creating a softer ground for cooperation, all right? For softening the relations, right? So if there is familiarity, we can understand that there would be less likelihood of conflict, or conflict can be managed. So for example, this year, the SCO through India's effort had designated Varanasi as the cultural capital of SCO, all right? So counterintuitive, but these are ways in which India would like conflicts to be resolved, right? A longer period of understanding, cultural cooperation, right? Now, the third thing is, if you would see, now we can go beyond the SCO, all right? So in the context of the Ukraine conflict, and remember it is a conflict in Eurasia, it is a conflict where one of the SCO members is involved. So it is a regional question, bilateral question, as well as global question. So thereby, in response to this conflict, India has consistently highlighted respect for UN Charter and international लॉ. सो यूक्रेन कॉन्फ्लिक्ट की भी अगर तैयारी कर रहे थे तो भी आपको इंडिया की पोजीशन पता होगी, ऑलराइट. सो बेसिकली नाउ यू लिस्ट डायरेक्ट और इनडायरेक्ट initiatives involving India or the ideas which are being promoted by India. All right, if you read the speech of the Prime Minister at the SCO summit, he starts by saying that this year SCO's summit is taking place when the world is plagued by multiple conflicts, right? Price rise, food security issues. So the problems had been identified. This question is simply asking you, are you aware of the kind of problems which are there for cooperation in the SCO? Some of these factors are direct, some of these factors are indirect. ऑलराइट, तो ये आपने कह दिया। आप कंक्लूजन की तरफ जब जाएंगे तो आप, अगर पिछला जो क्वेश्चन आया था उसमें एक वर्ड यूज करना था, शंघाई स्पिरिट। ऑलराइट, शंघाई स्पिरिट भी एक जार्गन है, विच आर द प्रिंसिपल्स guiding the actions of China. So towards the conclusion, you can say that India has also promoted the idea of regional digital and physical connectivity, as well as creating SCO as an energy club. Now, these measures of cooperation creating interdependence would also go a long way in addressing conflicts surrounding SCO. Meaning cooperation बढ़ेगा तो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट कम होगा। ऑलराइट, तो ये इंडिया का अप्रोच है, ये आपको बताना है। इंडिया डायरेक्टली जाके अफगानिस्तान में कुछ नहीं कर सकता, रशिया यूक्रेन वॉर रुकवाना इंडिया चाहेगा, लेकिन ज़रूरी नहीं कि इंडिया कर पाए, तो एडवेंचरस होने का कोई चांस नहीं है। इट वॉज अ प्रीटी बोरिंग क्वेश्चन। इफ यू हैड बाय एंड लार्ज followed the summit of SCO this year, you would have been able to answer this question. There are multiple examples that you can give, internal, external conflicts, and multiple examples thematically. For example, if you want, you can open up Secure itself, right, as principles like sovereignty, right, as issues like environmental cooperation, cultural cooperation, Secure का C, cultural cooperation, all right. तो इंडिया क्या प्रपोज करता है, दुनिया के बारे में इंडिया का क्या व्यू है, क्वेश्चन का मतलब ये है, एससीओ के थ्रू आंसर करना था। ठीक है, एनी डिफिकल्टी सो फार लिखने के फ्लो में? अब मैं आपको पूरा आंसर लिख के दिखा नहीं सकता, ऑलराइट, लेकिन दैट इज व्हाट आई कुड डू। ठीक है, आगे चलें। अब आप देखेंगे कि अगर आप तैयारी कर रहे थे इस साल, तो जो अभ्यास का हमारा टेस्ट था उसके अंदर ये क्वेश्चन आया था, ऑलराइट। तो अगर आपने उसके आंसर की तरह भी लिखा है तो भी ठीक है। Among other factors, strained ties with China and Pakistan make it difficult for India to fulfill its expectations from the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. All right? तो ये thematically identified था कि ये क्वेश्चन पूछा जा सकता है। और 2021 में आपके पास, अगर आप पढ़ रहे थे, आपने बाद में भी अगर पेपर देखा हो, अगर डिस्कशन देखा हो, तो आपके पास ये आइडिया था कि किन के बारे में बात करना है, राइट, किस रीजन के बारे में बात करना है, किन लोगों का नाम लेना है और किस तरह के फैक्ट्स बताने हैं, दैट एससीओ। बट इस क्वेश्चन में इस तरह के फैक्ट्स बताने का टाइम नहीं था हमारे पास, ऑलराइट। तो हर ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के बारे में जब तैयारी कर रहे होंगे तो फ्रॉम इंडियाज़ पर्सपेक्टिव, अगर इंडिया ने कुछ कहा है या इंडिया ने समिट में भाग लिया है, उसको ही बस फॉलो करते रहो तो इसका आंसर हो जाएगा, राइट। नाउ लेट्स मूव फॉरवर्ड। क्वेश्चन, नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन, अगेन अ 10 मार्कर। Indian diaspora has scaled new heights in the West. Describe its economic and political significance for India. Again, fairly obvious task to do, to start with. What the expectation is that there is a statement. I will start with substantiation, all right, which can mean a lot of things. For example, I can pick this Indian diaspora. I can also start with a definition, right? But then I have to ask whether the definition is the correct way to start in this kind of a question, meaning what Indian diaspora is, right? So Indian diaspora comprises of people who were born in India but now live outside the borders of Republic of India. That is Indian diaspora. Or it also includes people of Indian origin, all right, whose ancestors may have been India's citizens. You can start with this, or you can have a trump card. For example, you can start with this, and this is also coming from current affairs. Parliamentary Standing Committee. Remember, we quote to give weight to our ideas, all right? That's why we, in paper 2, generally should quote according to the Supreme Court judgment in so and so case, right? According to the CAG report, according to the World Bank, all right? Because we are adding weight to our argument. So Parliamentary Standing Committee had come up with a report on diaspora. अब मुझे एग्जामिनर को बताना है कि मैंने पढ़ लिया है ये, तो I will only mention these words, right? So according to the Parliamentary Standing Committee report on diaspora, India's engagement with diaspora is defined by 3 C's, all right? Connect, care, and celebrate, all right? Connect, care, and celebrate. तो हम जो भी पढ़ रहे हैं उससे जार्गन्स निकाल के लाएंगे, या हम ये सोचेंगे अपॉर्चुनिस्टिकली हम उसको कैसे कोट कर देंगे या आंसर में दिखा देंगे कि हमने ये पढ़ा है. So one thing that you are doing in this mains part, because it is partly exam of knowledge, is showcasing to the examiner, signaling to the examiner that knowledge part ठीक है आपका, all right, that you know, and you do this by highlighting certain familiar jargons or familiar terms. ठीक है, तो यहाँ कर दिया आपने, right? ये आपके पास है, और numbers क्या हैं आपके पास. So इस रिपोर्ट से ही या जनरली भी आपको पता है, India's diaspora size is 31 million. It is world's largest diaspora. All right? It is world's largest diaspora. ठीक है, ये facts हैं आपके पास. अब आप शुरुआत किसी भी तरह से कर लीजिए. At 31 million, India's diaspora is world's largest. In the categories of old and new diaspora, these are jargons of diaspora. In the categories of old and new diaspora, the West, particularly United States and European countries, have been a prominent center of the concentration of Indian diaspora. All right? आपने West ले आए आप, और फिर आप बता सकते हैं for example, right? So for example, इस रिपोर्ट के साथ साथ ये recently प्राइम मिनिस्टर की US विजिट भी हुई थी. All right? So उसमें अखबार में बहुत सारा कवरेज आया था. So in the US, the size of Indian diaspora is around 4.9 million. All right? 4.9 million. अब कनाडा आया, है ना? कनाडा के बारे में आप चिंतित हो गए, क्या हुआ, क्या नहीं हुआ, कैसे रिटेलिएट करेंगे, ऐसे कैसे बोल दिया, ऐसा नहीं बोलना चाहिए था. वो आपकी चिंता नहीं है. पर आपने देखा होगा, the concerns which have been raised, like let's say member of parliaments, when they are responding, they are saying that more than 1 lakh students are planning to go to Canada, to study in Canada, because Canada is a significant center of education, center of choice for Indians, right? Canada में there are nearly 1.5 million people of Indian origin, 1.5 million people of Indian origin, right? So around 1 million are the citizens of that country, but then substantially large part of the population is also Indian citizens, like students, right? तो आपके पास कनाडा का एग्जाम्पल आ गया, जो कि एक प्रोमिनेंट एग्जाम्पल है फ्रॉम नॉर्थ अमेरिका. उसके बाद आपके पास यूके का एग्जाम्पल आएगा, वेयर द इंडियन डायस्पोरा इज अराउंड 2% ऑफ द पॉपुलेशन. ऑल राइट? और एक बहुत ही ऑफ्ट रिपीटेड फैक्ट है दैट दे कॉन्ट्रीब्यूट 6% टू यूकेज जीडीपी. ऑल राइट? 6% टू यूकेज जीडीपी. ठीक है, तो मतलब सब्सटैंशिएट करने के लिए इनके कॉम्बिनेशन से आपको अपना इंट्रोडक्शन बनाना पड़ेगा कि आप ये सारी चीजें दिखा दें. ठीक है, अब आप इंट्रोडक्शन और कैसे लिख सकते हैं? आप लिख सकते हैं क्वेश्चन की मेन थीम से शुरू करके, रीसेंट अपॉइंटमेंट ऑफ, आगे तो आपको पता चल ही गया होगा, हु, एनी नंबर ऑफ पीपल. ऋषि सुनक एज ब्रिटेन्स प्राइम मिनिस्टर, बट ऑल्सो अजय पाल बंगा एज वर्ल्ड बैंक्स प्रेसिडेंट. ऑल राइट? वर्ल्ड बैंक्स प्रेसिडेंट, चॉइस आपकी है, राइट? मिस्टर अजय पाल बंगा केम टू इंडिया, he was one of the person whose photo with shaking hands with the prime minister was prominently being displayed, apart from Miss Georgia Meloni, जिनके बारे में काफ़ी लोगों ने ये किया. पर जॉर्जिया मेलोनी के अलावा भी इतनी सारी फीमेल लीडर्स थी. ऑल राइट? जॉर्जिया मेलोनी थी, शेख हसीना थी, राइट? उर्सुला वॉन डर लेयन थी, यूरोपियन कमीशन की चेयर, IMF की चेयर क्रिस्टेलिना जॉर्जिएवा थी, WTO की डायरेक्टर जनरल. ऑल राइट? ये भी थी. ठीक है, तो अजय पाल बंगा, आप ये भी शुरू कर सकते हैं, आप ऋषि सुनक से भी शुरू कर सकते हैं. अजय पाल बंगा रिप्रेजेंट्स द इकोनॉमिक राइज ऑफ इंडियन डायस्पोरा. ऋषि सुनक रिप्रेजेंट्स पॉलिटिकल राइज ऑफ इंडियन डायस्पोरा. एनी नंबर ऑफ एग्जाम्पल्स. एंटोनियो कोस्टा, प्राइम मिनिस्टर ऑफ पोर्चुगल. लियो वराडकर, प्राइम मिनिस्टर ऑफ आयरलैंड, इज ऑफ इंडियन ओरिजिन. ठीक है, तो आप ये स्प्रिंकलिंग कर इंट्रोडक्शन और उसके बाद के पार्ट में कर दें. अब बेनिफिट्स पे आ जाए तो क्वेश्चन तो मेन यही पूछ रहा है, डिस्क्राइब. यूपीएससी ने आसान कर दिया, डिस्क्राइब, बस आपको कहानी बता देनी है. तो पहला वन, पॉलिटिकली अगर हम देखें तो द इंडियन डायस्पोरा, आप जार्गन यूज करेंगे, इज कंसिडर्ड एज अ स्ट्रैटेजिक असेट बाय इंडिया. अकॉर्डिंग टू whom? Many people have said this, including the Prime Minister. All right? So widely regarded as strategic asset. they act to generate goodwill for India. Why? Because generally they are known for their skills, proficiency, work ethics. So their work contributes to the local economy, so contributes to India's image also. All right? So soft power, for example, right? For example, they are part of India's soft power. For example, you will see it has now become a tradition that White House celebrates Diwali. All right? It has now become a tradition that White House celebrates Diwali. Or it has also been prominently highlighted that Mr. Rishi Sunak went to Murari Bapu's Katha and said a Jai Shri Ram on 15th of August. Different people, different reactions, right? Or before that, he had highlighted how he lights Diwali after he lights diyas of Diwali outside the 10 Downing Street. So India's image, soft power को contribute करते हैं. ये कौन से points हैं? ये political points हैं. All right? Soft power को contribute करते हैं. इसके अलावा they support India's cause. So meaning their role is in advocating India's cause. They advocate India's cause. In what sense? So one very prominent and repeated example is how Indians in the US wrote letters to their Congress members to support the Indo-US nuclear deal. All right? So they lobbied, as some people would say, in favor of Indo-US nuclear deal. All right? So that is the political benefit that you will have. And certainly you can say that it has been seen in terms of warmth in bilateral engagements. All right? So for example, when the Prime Minister went to the US, he addressed the US Congress and he mentioned a Samosa caucus. All right? Whereby he was referring to the Vice President of the US, right? Kamala Harris. So again, we can make our points. So these are largely by and large political points. Now, one point is that Indians themselves have acquired a leading role. Where? In business, right? In the West, as well as they are in political positions, right? So for example, the president of Guyana in South America is of Indian origin, Muhammad Irfan Ali, all right? Dr. Muhammad Irfan Ali. Or the president of Suriname, another country in the Caribbean, is of Indian origin, Chandrika Prasad Santokhi. हाँ भैया, एग्जाम्पल्स ही आप ऐड करते जाओ. अगर आपके पास टाइम है तो बिल्कुल ये भी एग्जाम्पल करो, और अगर मेरे पास टाइम हो तो मैं लिस्ट दे दूंगा पूरी. मतलब समझ गए आप. मॉरिशियस जैसे ही आपने कहा मुझे समझ में आ गया कि आप मतलब समझ गए. ऑलराइट, बस इससे काम था. तो आपने ये बता दिया, तो आपने एक पॉइंट बना दिया कि भाई इंडियन देमसेल्व्स आर इन लीडिंग पोजीशंस. सो फॉर एग्जांपल, व्हाट डज इट मीन? इट मीन्स दैट Indians at the leading position in businesses are important decision makers when it comes to allocation of finances, investments. Right? So the Prime Minister met the CEO of Micron, all right, which is a semiconductor manufacturer, right? So thereby you will see Micron is doing what? Micron is setting up with the support of $800 million from Indian government a semiconductor assembling plant in Gujarat, all right, and it was in news a few days back. So these kinds of decisions, right? अब पॉलिटिकली हम ये नहीं कह सकते कि भाई जो हेड ऑफ स्टेट है वो इंडिया के फेवर में डिसीजन लेगा, तो हम यहाँ क्या कर सकते हैं भाई? इन द कमिटी ऑफ नेशंस, ऑलराइट. फॉर एग्जांपल, लुक एट G20. सो G20 had 2 heads of states who were of Indian origin. One the Prime Minister himself, another the Prime Minister of UK, Rishi Sunak. All right. So it strengthens solidarity and between India and other countries at global forums, all right, at global forums. So yesterday I saw a video where Mr. what is his name? Vivek Ramaswamy. Somebody approached him, started talking in Tamil. So he also responded in Tamil, all right. So there may be a day when, you know, global leaders are talking in any of the Indian languages. So there can be many examples. Now, economic examples. तो ये जो पॉइंट है, बिजनेस लीडरशिप को इकोनॉमी में ले आएंगे, पॉलिटिकल लीडरशिप मल्टीलैटरलिज्म, ऑलराइट. G20 जैसा एग्जांपल हम ले जाएंगे पॉलिटिकल में, ठीक है. अब इकोनॉमिक थोड़ा सा फोकस कर ले. सो दे कंट्रीब्यूट रिसोर्सेस टू इंडियाज डेवलपमेंट. फॉर एग्जांपल, रेमिटेंसेस रिसीव्ड बाय इंडिया is highest in the world. This year, according to World Bank, it crossed $100 billion US dollars. $100 billion US dollars. And 50% of this remittance comes from Western economies, Western countries, right? Around 50% comes from Gulf prominently, but nearly 50% also comes from, and then small segment comes from other parts, right? So 100 billion US dollars of diaspora, of remittances. US certainly is number one as source of remittances to India. UAE would be number two, all right? तो ये फैक्ट्स अभी बता सकते हैं. दूसरा बता सकते हैं भाई, they make investments, for example, through what are called NRE deposits, all right? So for example, if you see RBI in the month of June, July, comes up with very comprehensive documents, right, about the state of India's economy, etc. So this year's report would say around 138 billion US dollars of stock of NRE deposits, all right, meaning the money that NRIs have deposited in the NRE accounts, all right. So this is the economic contribution. Now you can also say that the diaspora, through the act of immigration, contributes in the creation of network of knowledge and capital, all right. Network of knowledge and capital का मतलब लोग पढ़ने जाते हैं, पढ़ के वापस आते हैं, all right. तो knowledge gain करके आ रहे हैं. तो पहले एक perspective था brain drain. So thereby the diaspora, Indian diaspora currently is instrumental in transforming brain drain into brain gain, all right. Brain gain, ठीक है. कोई जाता है बाहर किसी यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ने, तो उसी के मोहल्ले, गांव, शहर से कोई और भी जाता है, राइट. तो उसने एक रास्ता खोला, राइट. सो दिस इज नेटवर्क ऑफ नॉलेज, नेटवर्क ऑफ कैपिटल. ऑफ कोर्स सेंडिंग ऑफ रेमिटेंसेस, decision on investments, all right, these are all network of capital. So they help in the creation of network of knowledge and network of capital, which is important for the rise of an Atmanirbhar Bharat, because before this year's Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, the theme of the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas was contribution of the Indian diaspora to Atmanirbhar Bharat, right? तो ऐसे आपने बता दिया. अब आप अगर मौका मिले थोड़ा कॉशन दे दें. कैसे कॉशन दें? तो आप जाएंगे पार्लियामेंट्री स्टैंडिंग कमेटी की रिपोर्ट पे. इस कमेटी की रिपोर्ट का कहना है कि वी नीड टू कम अप विथ अ डेडिकेटेड डायस्पोरा पॉलिसी, ऑल राइट. दैट दिस हैज बीन बेनिफिशियल, बट गिवन द चेंजिंग नेचर ऑफ ग्लोबल पॉलिटिक्स एंड इकोनॉमिक्स एज वेल एज टेक्नोलॉजी, the continuation of this positive beneficial aspect depends on India developing a consolidated diaspora policy, right? According to whom? According to the Parliamentary Standing Committee. कि पहले तो पॉलिसी होनी चाहिए, दूसरा इन्होंने कहा कि नंबर होना चाहिए, राइट. एक डेटाबेस होना चाहिए एग्जैक्टली हमारे पास, जो है नहीं अभी. तीसरा इन्होंने कहा कि भाई ग्रीवांस रिड्रेसल के लिए मैकेनिज्म्स हैं, देयर आर ग्रीवांस रिड्रेसल मैकेनिज्म्स. अब ग्रीवांस को रिकॉर्ड करने के बजाय वो कितने टाइम में सॉल्व होता है, इस पे ध्यान देने की जरूरत है, ऑल राइट. सो फॉलो अप एक्शन in terms of grievance redressal. So pick and choose any of these suggestions. I suggest, say that the Parliamentary Standing Committee thereby has emphasized on the need for a consolidated diaspora policy on the part of India. All right. अब इसके अलावा कोई और फैक्ट हो, जो भी हो, आप इंक्लूड कर सकते हैं कि नहीं कर सकते हैं? बिल्कुल कर सकते हैं, राइट, अगर समय मिले तो. इतना लिखने के बाद आगे चलें. तो आपने देखा होगा अखबार में, है ना, जैसे कि ये तस्वीर आई थी, राइट. तो अगर आपने ये पढ़ा होता तो इसके आर्ग्यूमेंट्स यही होते, राइट. और अगर आपने अपनी तैयारी के साथ इसमें जोड़ लिया होता रेमिटेंसेस एटसेट्रा एटसेट्रा, तो भी आप लिख पाते, ठीक है. तो इसलिए अखबार पढ़ना जरूरी है. A significant takeaway from Prime Minister Narendra Modi's recent state visit to US was prominent role that Indian Americans are increasingly being seen in. From the US Congress, White House CEOs of top MNCs, prominent lawyers, doctors, academicians, PM's visit turned spotlight on them or their success stories. All right? तो ये अखबार पढ़ते रहिए, अपने आप आंसर हो जाएगा. और ये नंबर्स आपको इस तरह से मिलेंगे. अखबार पढ़ेंगे तो ये भी होता है इस तरह के जार्गन, दैट इंडियन डायस्पोरा इज कंसिडर्ड टू बी अ लिविंग ब्रिज बिटवीन इंडिया and the host countries. All right, in this case the West. Right? आगे चलें, अगर कोई प्रॉब्लम हो आप सवाल बिल्कुल पूछ सकते हैं. ठीक है? नहीं. क्या कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन में डबल सिटीजनशिप का प्रोविजन है? नहीं है. तो नहीं, एक मिनट कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन शुरू करते हैं ना, क्योंकि इस तरह के क्वेश्चन को मैं कहता हूं दे आर अबव माई पे चेक, है ना. इवन इफ आई से यस इट वुड नॉट मैटर. आई कैनॉट से कि दे या ना दे. देर इज अ लॉट ऑफ डिफिकल्टी इन्वॉल्व. Primarily it arises from our approach towards citizenship. We don't allow dual citizenship. We are not thinking of allowing dual citizenship. What we have thought about is that those NRIs who are still Indian citizens are living outside, can we allow them to vote without having the need to come back in India physically to the constituencies where they are enrolled as voters? ठीक है, ये प्रपोजल काफी चल रहा है. लेकिन अभी भी अगर कोई NRI है, विदेश में रह रहा है, वोट देने के लिए इंडिया ही आना पड़ेगा. ऑल राइट. और डुअल सिटीजनशिप के बहुत सारे कॉम्प्लिकेशंस हैं. किसको देंगे डुअल सिटीजनशिप? डायस्पोरा में सारे के सारे भले लोग तो है नहीं. कहां से आवाज आ रही है? अब आप फॉरेन पॉलिसी बना रहे हैं. मैं पहले ही मना कर चुका हूं, फॉरेन पॉलिसी बिल्कुल हो तो बहुत कुछ सकता है, ये भी हो सकता है और वो भी हो सकता है, बट व्हाट इज विद इन द रियल्म ऑफ रीजनेबल. सो इस एग्जामिनेशन की एक बहुत आवश्यक जरूरत है बीइंग रीजनेबल. राइट? वेदर यू आर एक्सट्रीमली इंटेलिजेंट लाइक आइंस्टीन और नॉट, दैट इज नॉट रिक्वायर्ड, क्योंकि आइंस्टीन ये एग्जाम देगा ही नहीं. ऑल राइट, बिकॉज लॉजिकली उनको समझ में नहीं आएगा कि भाई क्या 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 टेस्ट हो रहा है इस एग्जाम में. ऑल राइट, ये बात विदेशों को भी नहीं समझ में आती. जब भी मैं उनसे मिलता हूँ और ये मैं बताता हूँ कि मैं ये काम करता हूँ, तो वो पूछते हैं क्या एग्जाम है, क्या होता है, क्या इसमें तनख्वाह बहुत ज़्यादा मिलती है, क्या इसमें ये होता है. तो मैं कहता हूँ नहीं ऐसा नहीं है. तो फिर लोग क्यों आंख बंद करके इस एग्जाम की तैयारी करते हैं? ठीक है, तो आधा पार्ट तो होता है वैनिटी का. ठीक है, वैनिटी प्रोजेक्ट. तो आप अपने दिमाग में IAS बन के घूम रहे हैं, IFS बन के घूम रहे हैं, फॉरेन मिनिस्टर बन के घूम रहे हैं. जब तक सिलेक्शन ना हो, और सिलेक्शन के बाद भी एक चीज आप प्राइमरली हमेशा रहेंगे, वो क्या है? अ सिटीजन ऑफ इंडिया. सो थिंकिंग लाइक अ सिटीजन ऑफ इंडिया इज नॉट बैड, बिलीव मी. फॉरेन मिनिस्टर भी इंडियन सिटीजन ही होना चाहिए. ठीक है, हो सकता है, बहुत सारी चीजें हो सकती हैं, गवर्नमेंट कंसिडरेशन में नहीं है, इसलिए प्राइमरी कारण है ये कहने का कि इस बारे में बात करने का अभी कोई औचित्य नहीं है. ठीक है, और बहुत ही क्लियरली सजेशन है कि ऐसा सजेशन ना दें कि डुअल सिटीजनशिप दे देनी चाहिए, क्योंकि वो पार्लियामेंट्री स्टैंडिंग कमेटी की रिपोर्ट दिखाई, उसमें शायद हमसे समझदार लोग बैठे होंगे, उन्होंने ऐसा नहीं कहा है. अगर उन्होंने ऐसा इशारा भी किया होता तो शायद हम उस पॉइंट को निकाल के बोल देते कि ऐसा होना चाहिए. सो डुअल सिटीजनशिप नो, बट थिंकिंग अबाउट स्टेप्स टू फैसिलिटेट easier voting mechanism for the NRIs, right, can be one thing that you can suggest, because that has been considered. Right? Now, moving forward, the next question, which is the question number 19, all right, expansion of NATO. अब हम आगे 15 नंबर पे ज्यादा लिखने के लिए. तो अब इसमें हम आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं भाई एक्सपेंशन एंड स्ट्रेंथनिंग ऑफ नेटो इज हैपनिंग. राइट? तो आप तो या तो इसको एड्रेस कर सकते हैं, राइट, कि एक्सपेंशन हो रहा है. ठीक है, एक्सपेंशन एंड स्ट्रेंथनिंग ऑफ नेटो, जो भी एलिमेंट दिया हुआ है क्वेश्चन में हम उसका ही यूज करने की कोशिश करेंगे इंट्रोडक्शन करते समय. राइट? एक्सपेंशन एंड स्ट्रेंथनिंग ऑफ नेटो कैसे? 31 members, including 2 members joining very recently. Right? So expansion. Right? दूसरा, stronger US Europe strategic partnership. Can we say that it has been the traditional case? All right, this has been the traditional case. Europe has never been known for being a great military power, despite European countries having nuclear weapons. Europe, in a sense, has been subservient to the US interest. All right, and US-Europe strategic partnership was strong in the Cold War period also. It has a context, and it is again getting strong. For example, the European Union, इस साल के PT में क्वेश्चन आया था preliminary examination में, Trade Technology Council. India and European Union have started a Trade Technology Council, but before that, US and European Union had started a Trade Technology Council. All right. And then you will see, for example, it is also seen in terms of the position that they have adopted on Ukraine. All right, यूक्रेन रशिया कॉन्फ्लिक्ट पे जो पोजीशन है उसमें भी दिखता है कि ये स्ट्रॉन्ग स्ट्रैटेजिक पार्टनरशिप है इनके बीच में. और चौथा, we will also see that increasingly the US interest in the Indo-Pacific demands, and that is what the US Indo-Pacific strategy document also says, that it would be beneficial if European partners or NATO partners are also involved in the efforts of stability in the Indo-Pacific. So European Union itself has also come up with its own Indo-Pacific strategy, right? So why does European Union need to have an Indo-Pacific strategy? One, of course, is trade is global. So they are trading with Pacific countries. But Europe is neither Indian Ocean nor Pacific Ocean country. So when this is happening, Europe's Indo-Pacific approach is explained by its own interests, but primarily also because of the increasing value that US has given to Indo-Pacific and the issues in the Indo-Pacific. So it is quite visible. If you are observing these factors are quite visible, right? अब UPSC पूछा, what is your opinion about this statement? अब statement पूरा नहीं होता जब तक हम ये ना कहें कि it works well for India. Now this is debatable. Expansion is happening. Stronger US-Europe strategic partnership has been the historic case, and it is also visible that right now it is in the work, in the newer context. But whether it would be beneficial for India or not is not as obvious. All right? So how do we write this answer? So A again, क्योंकि statement में है तो contextualize करके हम substantiate करेंगे. All right? क्योंकि ये statement में है इसलिए contextualize करके substantiate करेंगे. कैसे? The recent inclusion of Sweden in NATO is another step in the expansion of NATO continuing since the end of Cold War. All right? Since the end of Cold War, in phases NATO has expanded. Right? ये एक periodic development रही है. हर एक साल 2 साल में नहीं होता, लेकिन इस साल 2 देश ज्वाइन किए. हिंदू का एक एडिटोरियल था, उसमें ये बात थी कि कैसे ना तो ना यूएस जीत रहा है ना रशिया जीत रहा है, राइट? अगर रशिया को नेटो के एक्सपेंशन से प्रॉब्लम थी तो नेटो का एक्सपेंशन तो हो गया, ऑलराइट? और यूएस को लगता है कि नेटो के एक्सपेंशन से रशिया को काउंटर कर सकते हैं, तो रशिया ने यूक्रेन पे हमला कर दिया, ऑलराइट? तो इसका मतलब है कि दोनों ग्रेट पावर बेवकूफ़ी कर रहे हैं, इसलिए इंडिया को ये बेवकूफ़ी नहीं करनी चाहिए. क्वाइट लॉजिकली इट इज़ अंडरस्टैंडेबल. हिंदू में एक एडिटोरियल था, राइट? दैट इज समथिंग दैट रिमेंबर फ्रॉम टीचिंग. चलिए इस बारे में बात होती रही है, तो हम शुरुआत ऐसे करेंगे सब्सटैंशिएशन कॉन्टेक्चुअलाइजेशन से करके कि रिसेंटली द ज्वाइनिंग ऑफ स्वीडन ऑफ नेटो इज कंटिन्यूएशन ऑफ इट्स एक्सपेंशन प्रोसेस, ऑलराइट, continuing since the end of Cold War. In the context of the ongoing Ukraine conflict, this acquires global significance. क्यों ग्लोबल लेवल तक पहले उसको ले जाना पड़ेगा? क्योंकि इंडिया का डायरेक्ट कोई लेना देना नहीं है नेटो से, ऑल राइट? सो इट हैज एक्वायर्ड ग्लोबल सिग्निफिकेंस. ऑन द वन हैंड इट रिमाइंड्स ऑफ what many scholars have called a new Cold War in the making, all right? That there is a new Cold War in the making, all right? On the other hand, it is coming in the backdrop of great power shift, whereby the competition is defined by conflict dyads, right? थोड़ा सा इसको jargon वाला कर देते हैं, ये शब्द जॉन मेयर श्राइमर यूज करते हैं, conflict dyads. So he says today's world is very dangerous world because we have 2 major conflict dyads. One is US Russia, another is US China, all right? And remember, all of them have nuclear weapons. So that's why what US and China do to each other is not a question for them. It is also a question for us. हमको भी डरना चाहिए, right? So thereby you will see global, जब हम कहेंगे global dimension acquire कर लिया है, and in that context it has been argued. अब हम दूसरे को blame करेंगे कि हम ऐसा नहीं कह रहे हैं. It has been argued. That is the language of the answer. Always be tentative in international relations. It has been argued by many that this new prominence of NATO and India's increasing strategic cooperation with US होल्ड्स सिग्निफिकेंस। ऑलराइट, एक तो इंडिया यूएस से स्ट्रैटेजिक कोऑपरेशन बढ़ रहा है जो कोल्ड वॉर पीरियड में नहीं था, नया है कुछ। दूसरा, नेटो पहले से था लेकिन नेटो का प्रोमिनेंस बढ़ गया है। ऑलराइट, और तीसरा, क्लोजर टू होम, इंडिया इटसेल्फ फेसेस many strategic challenges, one of them being the increasing aggression, unilateralism of China. इस तरह के jargon से हम इसको contextualize कर देंगे, right? In this context, the NATO US Europe strategic combination would be helpful. कैसे? नंबर वन, अब इसको हम ले जाएंगे कॉन्सेप्ट्स के रियल में। वन, it may be helpful in restoring equilibrium in international relations, especially in the context of increasing aggression of authoritarian regimes such as China. रशिया हमारा दोस्त है, उसको अथॉरिटेरियन नहीं कहेंगे, बट यूएस के व्यू से वो दोनों एक ही कैटेगरी में फॉल करेंगे, क्योंकि यूएस ऐसे डिफाइन करेगा लड़ाई को, बिटवीन टिरनी एंड फ्रीडम, ऑलराइट, बिटवीन डेमोक्रेसी एंड अथॉरिटेरियनिज्म। अब इंडिया को शौक नहीं है इतने बड़े टर्म्स में किसी और देश के साथ रिलेशन को डिफाइन करने का। ऑलराइट, तो डेफिनेटली इन द केस ऑफ चाइना, ग्लोबल इक्विलिब्रियम को मेंटेन करने में नेटो मदद कर सकता है, स्पेशली इफ चाइनाज यूनिलैटरलिज्म एंड एग्रेशन कंटिन्यूज अनअबेटेड। सो इट इज नॉट इन इंडियाज इंटरेस्ट, समबडी शुड बेल द कैट। ऑलराइट, दूसरा कॉन्टेक्स्ट क्या हो सकता है? दूसरा कॉन्टेक्स्ट ये हो सकता है कि भाई the NATO has a long history of promoting close security cooperation among countries which now have become close strategic partners for India. So India के केस में partners word use करेंगे, allies use नहीं करेंगे। NATO countries are allies with each other. India हमेशा partner ये शब्द use करता है, partners ही use करता है, ally नहीं। Alright? सो इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में कि ऑलरेडी इंडिया का स्ट्रैटेजिक कन्वर्जेंस है बहुत सारे देशों के साथ, खासतौर पे द लीडिंग कंट्री ऑफ नेटो विच इज यूएस। ऑलराइट, सो इन दैट कॉन्टेक्स्ट इट वुड बी अ लॉजिकल डायरेक्शन फॉर इंडिया टू टेक, राइट, कोऑपरेशन विथ नेटो इन द न्यू कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ नेटो, यूएस एंड यूरोपियन यूनियन स्ट्रैटेजिकली कमिंग टुगेदर। ठीक है, तो ये हम कह सकते हैं दूसरा। ठीक है, तीसरा, द कलेक्टिव सिक्योरिटी डिबेट। So if you would remember, or if you would recall, if you follow India's foreign policy, there is a lot of debate which goes on the Security Council, right? And Ruchira Kamboj has, who is India's permanent representative to the UN, in her statements has made India's view on collective security clear. Second, you have the views of Dr. Jaishankar himself. He was there at the UN, all right, a few days back. So did you listen to it? If you want to study foreign policy, थोड़ा ध्यान दे लो, right? Jargons अपने आप पिक हो जाते हैं। So in that context, what we are saying is this: there is an ongoing debate on collective security. All right? What is the example? So when the Russia-Ukraine conflict is taking place, if you have read the writings, people are saying that China may take advantage of this to create its own narrative of security, which is what China has announced, what is called GSI, Global Security Initiative. मतलब अभी तक यूएस इतनी बड़ी बड़ी बातें करता था कि ग्लोबल सिक्योरिटी कैसे होनी चाहिए, कलेक्टिव सिक्योरिटी कैसे होनी चाहिए, अब चाइना भी इस विषय में बात करने लगा है, राइट? सो डेफिनेटली इंडियाज एसोसिएशन would be beneficial in the context of shaping the debates on collective security globally, keeping in mind the fact India's insistence on the respect for sovereignty, territorial integrity and countries abiding by agreements. ये कहाँ से आ रहा है? चाइना से। जब चाइना को जवाब देना होता है तो हम ये कहते हैं, right? That collective security cannot be ensured unless countries violate others' sovereignty, territorial integrity. तो तीसरा commonality कहाँ से आ रहा है? Because NATO's position, without saying, on Russia-Ukraine conflict is also this. Why is it a problem? Because here is one member of the UN which has violated the territorial integrity and sovereignty of other member of the UN. तो प्रिंसिपल्स के लेवल पे अगर बात करें तो इस तरह के प्रिंसिपल्स नेटो भी हाईलाइट कर रहा है, इंडिया भी हाईलाइट कर रहा है, इंडिया चाइना के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हाईलाइट कर रहा है, नेटो रशिया के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हाईलाइट कर रहा है। सो इस तरह से इंडिया को फायदा हो सकता है। चौथा फायदा हो सकता है इन टर्म्स ऑफ एक्सपोजर to the armed forces, because we conduct multiple exercises. The primary purpose is promoting familiarity, interoperability, right? So exposure through exercises with NATO countries would be helpful in terms of India or Indian armed forces gaining exposure, further exposure, all right, or experience. And it can also be helpful in the fourth concept. If we remove the idea of traditional security coming from states, there are lots of non-traditional security areas where force is required. So for example, in combating maritime piracy, there is already cooperation between NATO task force in the Indian Ocean region, and Indian Navy is also present there. So this can be beneficial in terms of capacity building in combating non-traditional and rising threats to security. Prominent example, piracy. All right, piracy. And similarly, if you want to bring, you can bring in terrorism, all from India's perspective. Now, यहाँ तक तो आपने बता दिया कि ये हो सकता है. It has been argued, and thereby now you will make a transition. So, in this context, the discussions on a NATO plus kind of format argues NATO engaging with non-members like India. All right? And supportive views have also been expressed by US and NATO officials. Right? तो आपने ये भी आइडेंटिफाई कर लिया कि ऐसा है, नेटो प्लस की तरह की बात चल रही कि भाई इंडिया जैसे देशों के साथ बाय एंड लार्ज हमारा मिलता जुलता ही है, तो क्यों नहीं कोऑपरेट करे. ठीक है, लेकिन अब यहां पे आप लेके आएंगे हाउ एवर इंडियाज फॉरेन पॉलिसी हैज कंसिस्टेंटली stood for peaceful means of resolving issues, including global, regional, and bilateral conflicts. How do we know that? Go back to Article 51 of the Indian Constitution. What does it say? One of the things, pacific settlement of disputes. Number 2, from non-alignment to multi-alignment, meaning we say in the Cold War period, India's policy was non-alignment. In this period, our policy, we say multi-alignment. Multi-alignment means simultaneously pursuing relations with all major power centers. So from non-alignment to multi-alignment, India's criticism of military alliances has remained unchanged. All right? And India's views military alliances as destabilizing, leading to great power rivalry, strategic competition, rather than aiding in peace. All right? हमारा ये नहीं मानना है कि और military alliances से चीजें हो जाएंगी. Military alliances are part of the problem. So this is something that preference should be clear. Thereby, in this context, it has been made clear by India that it is not interested in NATO plus kind of formulations. It has to be highlighted towards the conclusion of India की position को और highlight करेंगे that India believes in a multipolar world with multilateral cooperation as its basis, rooted in a rules-based order. All right? Rooted in rules-based order. So it is traditions of India's foreign policy currently articulated, but also NATO. इस तरह से आप इस चीज को आंसर कर सकते थे. 3 बेसिक तरीके से आप सोच सकते थे. पोटेंशियल ऑफ नेटो, व्हाट नेटो इज, प्रोस्पेक्ट्स ऑफ नेटो मीनिंग करेंटली और आगे चल के क्या नेटो का कंट्रीब्यूशन हो सकता है, और तीसरा इंडियाज व्यू. ऑलराइट, इंडियाज व्यू. सो पोटेंशियल एंड प्रोस्पेक्ट्स you talk in terms of what arguments are for it being beneficial, and then you clearly highlight India's view, right, that this is not going to happen. All right, India would not like to promote cooperation with NATO, but by and large you also did not disagree with this idea कि भाई यूएस नेटो का क्लोज आना इंडिया के लिए फायदेमंद हो सकता है, यूएस और यूरोप का खास तौर पे, राइट, और अधिकतर मेंबर नेटो के यूरोपियन देश ही हैं. ठीक है, तो ये आप कर सकते हैं. चलिए आगे चलें और लास्ट क्वेश्चन को देखें, विच इज सी इज एन इंपॉर्टेंट कंपोनेंट ऑफ C is the important component of, if you remember the question I've already shown you, C is an important component of the cosmos. All right? So, अब ये question भी आप कैसे शुरू कर सकते हैं? Remember few jargons. Maritime domain. All right? Maritime domain awareness. Blue economy. राइट? अब ये जार्गन्स है, ठीक है? HADR, ह्यूमैनिटेरियन असिस्टेंस एंड डिजास्टर रिलीफ। अब इन सब में कॉमन क्या है? These are all issues which are associated with the ocean. All right? So oceans के बारे में आपकी समझ शुरू होती है ज्योग्राफी से, right? What is ocean, what is sea, what is gulf, what is bay? तो ये तो आपको पता ही है, ठीक है? इस तरह के मैप में आप चाहें तो ओशंस का मैप बना सकते हैं, ब्रॉडली दिखा सकते हैं, राइट? वर्ल्ड मैप बना सकते हैं बेसिकली, राइट? ये दिखाने के लिए कि ओशन से क्या होता है, और उस मैप में पॉइंट आउट कर दें कि ओशंस में क्या क्या होता है, राइट? ओशंस में क्या क्या होता है? ओशंस आर इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर व्हाट? ओशंस आर इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर ट्रेड, इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज, रिसोर्सेस, पेट्रोलियम, ऑफशोर, प्लस आर deposits or heavy sands or polymetallic nodules, so they are considered to be resource domains. और क्या होता है? They are important conduits of transport, all right? Meaning they are the part of the network, global network of trade, because bulk of international trade takes place through oceans. They are also important in terms of food security, which is fisheries, all right? They are also important in the context of renewable energy, climate change, environment, right? For example, regulation of phenomenon like monsoon, right? So first have this perspective कि किस तरह से आप सोच सकते हैं समुद्रों के बारे में. And then lastly, oceans also come into news because countries are increasing their naval capabilities. There is strategic competition between countries, and navies are important component of the armed forces of any country. So these are different levels of thinking about the oceans, right? So now you will see, for example, news में अभी क्या है? US objected to Chinese research vessel docking in Sri Lanka. Last year भी हुआ था. So these kinds of things remind you about the oceans. ठीक है? अब इसके अलावा और क्या? इसके अलावा और क्या आपको रिमाइंड करेगा ओशंस का? इंडिया से रिलेटेड देख लेते हैं जरा, इंडिया से रिलेटेड क्या है? डायरेक्टर जनरल ऑफ शिपिंग का कहना है, as far as IMO is concerned, there are 36 instruments it has developed so far, agreements, codes, conventions. All right? India has ratified 18 instruments, another 7 are under consideration. So for example, India is a large ship recycling hub. Bangladesh is becoming another. It is environmentally hazardous. All right? It's a hazardous industry, dismantling, recycling of ships. So in India, there is a consideration right now going on whether we accept the ship recycling related convention of the IMO or not, right? We would have to think about it. Why? Because we are a country with 7,500 miles of coastline. We have a large shipping sector. We are focusing on port-based development, and we also have a large ship recycling facility on the coast of Gujarat, etc. तो हम वो सोच रहे हैं. तो इंडिया के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में डिबेट्स, ठीक है? इसके अलावा IMO itself started functioning in 1959. 1948, the UN creates it as a specialized agency through a resolution. It has 175 members. Its headquarters is in London. All right, these are facts that you would recall. And its structure comprises of an assembly at the top. All 175 members are part of it. This assembly then appoints a council which takes all the decisions. India was elected to the council in 2017. Next year also in the biennial, India is presenting its candidature. And the council then depends on the work of 5 technical committees. All right? One committee is on maritime safety. Another committee is on maritime environment. So these are the committees. So meaning it's primarily a technical body, an intergovernmental body with a technical function. Since international shipping is a transnational activity, how to regulate it would involve views of states, views of the private operators who carry shipping activities, and also from industry and academia technical inputs. All right? So it has 175 members, but also 3 associate members, but also many non-governmental members. Primary task, developing technical standards, right? In order to create efficient, effective, safe, and environmentally sustainable shipping throughout the globe. ठीक है? तो ये IMO, अब इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में हमको ये पता है कि IMO started functioning in 1959. It is the year in which India also has been its members since. All right? इंडिया इज अ मेंबर। अब देखें, इट हैज सर्टेन इंपॉर्टेंट कन्वेंशंस। तो क्या याद करना है? अब इसके 36 इंस्ट्रूमेंट्स तो आप याद नहीं कर सकते, लेकिन कुछ मेजर होंगे, राइट? तो ये फैक्ट्स होते हैं जो एग्जाम में आपके आंसर को डिफरेंशिएट करेंगे उन लोगों के आंसर से जो कहानी लिख के आएंगे। ऑलराइट, तो कुछ नहीं याद हो तो ये इंटरनेशनल कन्वेंशन फॉर द सेफ्टी ऑफ लाइफ एट सी, राइट, 1974, मोस्ट कंसोलिडेटेड रीसेंट वर्जन इज 1974, बट एडिशन होते रहते हैं, ठीक है। पहली बार ये आया था जब टाइटैनिक डूबा था। टाइटैनिक के बारे में काफी जोक आपने सुना होगा, सो हियर इज अ इंटरेस्टिंग स्निपेट, राइट। टाइटैनिक वाज अ लार्ज शिपिंग डिजास्टर इफ यू वुड रिमेंबर। तो उस पर एक तो लियोनार्डो डिकैप्रियो और केट विंसलेट की फिल्म बन गई, ऑलराइट, और उसके अलावा शिपिंग के प्रति उसने ध्यान अट्रैक्ट किया, तो सोलास जैसे कन्वेंशन की, सेफ्टी ऑफ लाइफ एट सी, ऑलराइट। तो ये आपको याद करना है, ठीक है। इंडिया हैज रेटिफाइड इट, राइट, इट हैज बीन इफेक्टिव सिंस 1982, इंडिया हैज रेटिफाइड इट। इसके अलावा रिसेंटली 2020, right? So IMO now is focusing on how to curb emissions in the shipping industry, right? So renewable energy की तरफ बढ़ रहे हैं। तो India has been selected first country under IMO Green Voyage 2050 project। मैं केवल ये दिखा रहा हूँ कि इंडिया के पर्सपेक्टिव से आप कैसे अपने आंसर को सोच सकते थे, राइट? नाउ कल क्या था? What date was yesterday? 28th। So every day is a day in history। ऑलराइट, हर दिन कुछ ना कुछ तो हुआ होगा। एक छोटा सा इंटरेस्ट तो आप ये भी डेवलप कर सकते हैं कि विकिपीडिया पे जाएं और देखें कि इस दिन की हिस्ट्री क्या है। येस्टरडे वाज 28 सितंबर इज इंटरनेशनल मैरीटाइम, वर्ल्ड मैरीटाइम डे। यूएन सेलिब्रेट करता है, आईएमओ सेलिब्रेट करता है। थीम क्या है इसका? ऑलराइट, थीम है मार्पोल एट 50, राइट। मार्पोल एक कन्वेंशन है आईएमओ का, अगेन फिर से, तो सोलास और दूसरा मार्पोल, ये तो आपको याद रह सकता था कि इस तरह कन्वेंशन इसने डेवलप किए, ठीक है। तो ये मार्पोल, इंटरनेशनल कन्वेंशन फॉर द प्रिवेंशन ऑफ पॉल्यूशन फ्रॉम शिप्स। तो दिख गया, मैरीटाइम सिक्योरिटी, सोलास सेफ्टी, सोलास एंड सिक्योरिटी, प्रिवेंशन ऑफ दिस मार्पोल, इंटरनेशनल कन्वेंशन फॉर द प्रिवेंशन ऑफ पॉल्यूशन फ्रॉम शिप्स, राइट। तो कुछ नहीं होता तो करंट अफेयर से इस तरह की जानकारी भी अगर आपके पास होती, इसलिए अखबार पढ़ना चाहिए, तो भी आप आंसर लिख सकते थे, क्योंकि स्पेसिफिसिटी ऑफ कंटेंट रिक्वायर्ड था, कुछ इस तरह की चीजें, ठीक है। सो इफ वी लुक एट इट, देयर इज नो कॉमन डेफिनेशन ऑफ मैरीटाइम सिक्योरिटी। सो दिस क्वेश्चन ऑल्सो गिव्स यू टू कैटेगरी, मैरीटाइम सेफ्टी, मैरीटाइम सिक्योरिटी। Security is larger term, so you can have this definition. There is no single definition, but it categorizes maritime concerns such as national security, marine environment, economic development, human security. All right? तो बेसिक इस तरह की कुछ जानकारी आपके पास होनी चाहिए थी। अब इसका आंसर कैसे लिखेंगे? डिस्कस इन द लाइट ऑफ द अबव स्टेटमेंट द रोल ऑफ आईएमओ। स्टेटमेंट चला गया। स्टेटमेंट ओशंस के बारे में, मैंने आपको बोला ओशंस के बारे में सोचने के 20 तरीके, लेकिन इन 20 तरीकों को एक पर्टिकुलर कंसर्न और जार्गन में हम डाल सकते हैं, जिसको कहते हैं ग्लोबल कॉमन्स। ऑलराइट, ग्लोबल कॉमन्स, राइट। ओशंस आर इंपॉर्टेंट resource domains not only for individual nations, coastal nations, but also they are important part of global commons। ये global commons क्या होता है? Such resource domains where there is no single sovereign claim, but it is considered to be trust of civilization, trust of humanity। तो global commons एक jargon आ गया, right? So आप शुरू इस तरह से कर सकते हैं jargon use करके कि in recent times focus on maritime activities has been a key concern in debates on global commons. All right? Debate on global commons. In this context, forums such as UN have been instrumental in developing international cooperation, are instrumental in developing international cooperation. The IMO is a specialized agency of the United Nations dedicated for promoting the safety and security of maritime activities, specifically in the realm of shipping. All right? तो आप IMO भी ले आए, it has been functioning since 1959 भी ले आए, ठीक है? Now this can be, or its contributions can be seen in terms of following. तो आप कैटेगराइजेशन कीजिए और कैटेगराइजेशन में आप बताइए फॉर एग्जांपल ये पहला कन्वेंशन, राइट, इट्स अ कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव सेट ऑफ गाइडलाइंस फॉर द शिपिंग इंडस्ट्री, इंडिविजुअल्स, शिप ऑपरेटर्स एंड ऑल्सो फॉर स्टेट्स इन फॉर्मुलेटिंग देयर पॉलिसीज। ठीक है, तो फॉर एग्जाम्पल जो ये इंडस्ट्रियल सेफ्टी कोड आया है आईएमओ का, ये लेटेस्ट एडिशन है, राइट, इट इज फॉर स्टैंडर्ड्स ऑफ सेफ्टी फॉर शिप्स कैरिंग इंडस्ट्रियल पर्सन्स फॉर ऑफशोर एक्टिविटीज। जैसे ऑयल रिग पे कोई पर्सनल जा रहा है, शिप का पर्पज ये है, तो उनकी सेफ्टी के लिए क्या स्टैंडर्ड्स होने चाहिए। ये मोस्ट रीसेंट एडिशन हुआ है एंड इंडिया हैज ऑल्सो एक्सेप्टेड इट, दैट्स व्हाई इट वाज इन न्यूज। तो आप उसकी बात कर सकते हैं। इसके अलावा आप इस तरह के एग्जाम्पल दे सकते हैं, राइट, दैट IMO ऑल्सो कंटिन्यूसली engages in initiatives such as the Green Voyage 250 project in order to stress on decarbonization for environmental sustainability of the shipping sector। ठीक है, तो आपने ये एग्जाम्पल दे दिया और ये एग्जाम्पल देके आपने एक्सप्लेन कर दिया IMO क्या है, तो फैक्चुअल होगा इसका आंसर। लेकिन वो स्पेशल पॉइंट कहाँ से आएगा इंडिया को लाने से, कैसे? अब आप देखेंगे फॉर एग्जाम्पल इन इंडियाज पॉलिसी वेयर इज द मैरीटाइम डोमेन फीचरिंग। सो यू विल सी फॉर एग्जाम्पल इंडो पैसिफिक इज ऑल्सो अबाउट मैरीटाइम डोमेन, ऑलराइट। नेशनल सेंटर फॉर पोलर एंड ओशियानिक रिसर्च इज ऑल्सो अबाउट मैरीटाइम डोमेन, पोलर एंड ओशियानिक रिसर्च, ये हमारे इंस्टीट्यूशंस हैं। इसके अलावा हमारी एक पॉलिसी है जिसको हम कहते हैं सिक्योरिटी एंड ग्रोथ फॉर ऑल इन द रीजन। सो India has continued in this context, or in the context of the significance of IMO, India has continued to cooperate with it by adopting its codes and convention in national legislations. All right, IMO के conventions का कोई मतलब नहीं unless states adopt it and states then also make changes in their domestic law. ऐसे ये चीज़ implement होती है। तो पहला तो इंडिया की पॉलिसी मेकिंग में मैरीटाइम डोमेन के बारे में IMO का इनपुट बहुत वैल्यूएबल है। दूसरा, इट कन्वर्जेस विथ इंडियाज ओन व्यू ऑन द मैटर्स ऑफ ग्लोबल कॉमन्स एज वेल एज द ऑब्जेक्टिव्स ऑफ इंडियाज सागर, ऑलराइट, सिक्योरिटी एंड ग्रोथ फॉर ऑल इन द रीजन अप्रोच। सो एंड विथ इंडिया, एंड विथ हाउ दिस वुड बी हेल्पफुल फॉर इंडिया, दिस इज हेल्पफुल फॉर इंडिया। और यू कैन ऑल्सो end by saying that in this context India is also actively considering application of IMO conventions in the area of ship recycling। ऑलराइट, इसमें ये होगा कि आपने प्रॉब्लम के साथ छोड़ा, सागर के साथ छोड़ने में ये होगा कि आप दिखा रहे हैं कि कैसे इंडिया के जो गोल्स हैं, इंडिया की जो वैल्यूज हैं, उनके साथ कोइंसाइड करता है IMO का गोल। ऑलराइट, सो दिस इज वेयर वी एंड द डिस्कशन। इन द लास्ट आई विल शो यू दैट नथिंग इज बियॉन्ड द रीच। जियोपॉलिटिकल रियलिटीज में येट पुश इंडिया क्लोजर टू नेटो, हर्षवी पंत ORF में लिख रहे थे, कब लिख रहे थे ये भी देख लीजिए आप। मेनली मेरे लिए इंपॉर्टेंट ये है June 30, 2023। सो इट्स नेवर टू लेट टू प्रिपेयर फॉर IR, उसकी चिंता नहीं करनी चाहिए। एक चीज मैं आपको कह सकता हूँ, दिस इज द टेक अवे, डोंट वरी अबाउट IR, राइट, जस्ट बी रेगुलर। इंडिया केपेबल ऑफ काउंटरिंग चाइनीज एग्रेशन, रिफ्यूजेस टू ज्वाइन नेटो, सेज S जयशंकर। शुरू में ही मैंने आपको बोल दिया, ये भी अखबार में था। कब था? 9 जून 2023। इट्स नेवर टू लेट, ओके, टू वैल्यू एड। अब आप पढ़ेंगे तो इसमें दिखेगा कि भाई क्या लिखा हुआ है। यहाँ पे बेसिक बात यह है कि भाई US सेलेक्ट कमिटी के डिबेट के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में नेटो प्लस जैसी बात हुई थी, राइट, कि चाइना के कंपटीशन के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में वो कह रहे हैं कि नेटो को स्ट्रेंथन करो, इंडो पैसिफिक में भी उसका रोल हो सकता है, और नेटो प्लस जैसा फ्रेमवर्क बनाओ जिसमें इंडिया को शामिल कर सकते हैं। इंडिया का कहना है ठीक है, अच्छी बात है, आप हमारी इतनी इज्जत करते हैं, लेकिन पहले हमसे पूछ तो लीजिए हम चाहते भी है कि नहीं चाहते हैं, राइट। इफ इंडिया वांट्स, इंडिया शुड रिफ्यूज अमेरिकाज नेटो प्लस बेट। बहुत रिलेवेंट था ये इंटरव्यू, ये पर्टिकुलर पब्लिकेशन हिंदू के अंदर इस पर्टिकुलर क्वेश्चन के डायरेक्ट रिलेवेंस को अगर देखें तो, राइट, हिंदू एक्सेसिबल होता है सबको, ना कोई न्यूयॉर्क टाइम्स है, ना कोई वॉशिंगटन पोस्ट है, ना कोई प्रोजेक्ट सिंडिकेट है। रेगुलरली कोई भी एक सोर्स उठा के पढ़ते रहो और भरोसा करो कि ठीक ठाक लोग ही लिख रहे हैं, कोई स्पेशल फैक्ट नहीं चाहिए। टेररिज्म, चाइना, BRI, रशिया, यूक्रेन, दीज वर डिस्कस्ड एट SCO मीट। यहाँ पे SCO था, थोड़ा सा स्क्रीनशॉट लेने में लगता है मुझसे गलती हुई, बट यहाँ पे SCO था, ठीक है। तो मतलब आपको पहले ही पॉइंट मिल रहा है कि इस तरह की चीज़ें, टेररिज्म, China's BRI, Russia-Ukraine conflict. Conflict differences, these were the themes surrounding the SCO this year. और India, all India was trying to do at SCO and G20 कि भाई ये जो सबकी अपनी अपनी प्रॉब्लम है वो कैसे हमारी सक्सेस के रास्ते में नहीं आए. जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट आना चाहिए. और जॉइंट स्टेटमेंट आने के लिए सबसे ज़रूरी था कि हम तैयार हों कि हम कुछ बातें इनडायरेक्टली कहें. तो इनडायरेक्टली बातें कहते हैं प्रिंसिपल्स की मदद से. ऑल राइट, विद द हेल्प ऑफ प्रिंसिपल्स. सो सोवरेनिटी, टेरिटोरियल इंटीग्रिटी, मल्टीलैटरलिज्म, मल्टीपोलैरिटी इस बार के पेपर में बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट था. दूसरा, G20 हो चुका था इस पेपर तक. तो अगर आप हर आंसर में G20 का कुछ मेंशन कर पाते, खास तौर पे नेटो वाले आंसर में, ठीक है, या SCO वाले आंसर में जहां पे कॉन्फ्लिक्ट की बात आई, तो वो भी आपका एक वैल्यू एडिशन दिखता. सो अगेन इट्स नॉट टू लेट. एग्जाम के दौरान और बहुत पास हो रहा था G20, बट इट वॉज सो इंपॉर्टेंट एन इवेंट कि अगले दिन का अखबार पढ़ लेते तो आपको अलग अलग पेपर्स के लिए पॉइंट मिल जाता. ऑल राइट, सो दैट इज इट. दैट वुड बी ऑल. कीप डूइंग दिस. राइट, ये IMO की अपनी वेबसाइट है. उसमें क्या लिखा हुआ है? मैरीटाइम सेफ्टी कमिटी अडॉप्टेड मैंडेटरी इंटरनेशनल कोड ऑफ सेफ्टी फॉर शिप्स कैरिंग इंडस्ट्रियल पर्सन. I myself have taught in current affairs, so I remember this was in news. All right? So, ये आप करते रहें. और दूसरा, ये मैं बोल रहा था शुरुआत में आपको आर्टिकल, Why India's pact with Sri Lanka on Maritime Rescue Center is significant. Indian Express, so कुछ लोग Indian Express पसंद करते हैं. People have very strong opinion about Indian Express and the Hindu. इस तरह के चॉइस के लिए कोई स्ट्रांग ओपिनियन नहीं होनी चाहिए. जो अखबार पसंद आए वो पढ़ो. राइट? तो इंडियन एक्सप्रेस, अब इसके अंदर मैरीटाइम रेस्क्यू सेंटर, मतलब इंडिया कुछ कर रहा है. और इसी आर्टिकल के अंदर नीचे पहली और दूसरी लाइन में होता है IMO. तो IMO का काम समझ में ना आए तो एग्जाम्पल्स के थ्रू समझ सकते हैं कि किस तरह की एक्टिविटीज़ को इसके स्टैंडर्ड्स और कन्वेंशंस प्रमोट करते हैं. और 2 कन्वेंशन कम से कम मेनली आप याद कर लेते. ठीक है, सोलास और मार्पोल. ठीक है, और करंट अफेयर्स जितना देखते रहेंगे वैल्यू एडिशन होता रहेगा. बाकी आपके हाथ में. ऑल द बेस्ट, मेक योर ओन लक. That would be all, unless you have questions. If you don't have questions, then I'm done. Thank you for your patience. Right?